4 days away from a government shutdown, and Republicans are on vacation. House Republicans on vacation cancel votes on the eve of a government shutdown. And Donald Trump is at a golf event. He doesn't have the time to meet with Democratic leaders to fund the government and address the Republican health care crisis. But Donald Trump, right now, as we speak, is at a golf event. It's outrageous. And why are they running out of town? It's because Republicans want to shut down the government. They want to continue to inflict pain on the American people, and they want to continue to gut the health care of everyday Americans. Democrats are not going to go along to get along.
So we've been working really hard to get the House back to the regular appropriations order, and we've achieved that. In the House, in a bipartisan fashion, they passed all 12 appropriations bills through the committee, 3 of them off the floor. The Senate passed 3 bills. Remember the old videos on Saturday mornings about how a bill becomes a law? If the House and the Senate disagree on an appropriation spending bill, they go to a conference committee to work it out. We voted to do that. All this is working well, but we're coming up on the end of the fiscal year, September 30th. So we need a few more weeks to finish this good work. So what we did in a responsible manner as Republicans in charge is we offered a totally clean short-term CR to get that job done. Chuck Schumer saw that. He returned a counteroffer that is filled with partisan wish lists and poison pills and demands. It includes, for example, Brett, what Chuck Schumer is arguing for. He wants to reinstate free health care for illegal aliens. He wants to add $500 million to prop up liberal media outlets. And he wants to add a massive $1.4 trillion spending hike to what should be a simple 7-week stopgap funding measure. We can't do that. We're not going to do it.
Yeah. Boy. So we got to talk about Democrats going into full-blown panic mode because the Trump administration is now playing hardball when it comes to the Democrats' threats to allow the government to shut down because they are making ridiculous demands of Republicans in the Trump administration in exchange for keeping the government open. Now, I want to talk about the politics behind what is currently happening because the politics are truly fascinating due to the fact that Democrats are under pressure to make it seem as if they are standing up to Trump. Because last time that we went through this whole government shutdown thing back in March, Democrats got a whole lot of backlash for folding to the president without any concessions, okay? Remember how Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, they got a whole lot of backlash after Democrats decided to vote to keep the government open, despite claiming that the shutdown would be on the president and Republicans, even though, again, Democrats are the ones that are refusing to agree with the Republicans on keeping the government open, right? Yeah, they ended up folding, and they got a whole lot of backlash from the far left. So now they're under pressure to shut down the government in order to show that they're fighting against Trump, right? And they're trying to get some ridiculous concessions out of this administration and Republicans that I want to talk about here. Because anybody with common sense knows that these concessions are a non-starter, right? Like Democrats are not serious right now, right? This is a show and they're 100% going to fold, right? I know for a fact they're going to fold. I just think it's entertaining to watch them pretend as if they have a backbone and that they're actually going to be willing to let the government shut down, at least for a significant period of time, in order to fight Trump, right? So here are the concessions, right? The first concession, major concession, is to extend the Biden-era Obamacare COVID subsidies, right? So there were subsidies that went towards Obamacare during the pandemic. The pandemic is over. So why do we need these subsidies, right? They should not be extended. They should be allowed to expire. We're not in the pandemic anymore. Maybe we should roll back on all that spending that we did during the pandemic because, again, we've moved beyond that, okay? The second concession that Democrats are demanding is for the Republicans to repeal their reform of Medicaid in the big, beautiful bill, right? So you remember Democrats boo-hoo-whining and crying about Medicaid? People are not going to get their Medicaid, right? This is what they were crying about. Now, those reforms included work requirements, right? Requiring people to actually work in order to receive government handouts for health care, and also taking away health care for illegals, okay? That is what Republicans did, and Democrats are demanding that Republicans basically repeal what they did in the big, beautiful bill, which, again, is a non-starter. And then the last demand is for Republicans to restore funding to these liberal media propaganda outlets like PBS and NPR that had their funding cut earlier this year. Okay, so once you understand the demands from Democrats, you understand how silly this all is and how this is such a game from Democrats in order to virtue signal to their far left base of lunatics who, again, at this point, they don't really believe in anything outside of being opposed to President Trump. But the Trump administration Republicans are basically showing that, you know what? We don't care about your demands. In fact, we're going to tell you to kick rocks, right? The White House canceled what was supposed to be a meeting between the leaders of the Democrat Party and the Trump administration. Trump decided, you know what? I'm good. I'm not going to have this meeting. I'm going to go golfing instead. And on top of that, if Democrats do allow the government to shut down, then we're going to take this as an opportunity to lay off more federal workers, which we know that also would piss off Democrats. And now that has Democrats in full-blown panic mode.
As another government shutdown looms over D.C., hundreds of thousands of federal workers are on notice.
A memo from the Office of Management and Budget says agencies should prepare for mass firings if Congress doesn't pass a spending bill by October 1st. That deadline is just days away.
News 4's Megan McGrath joins us live from Capitol Hill with the details. Megan, good morning.
Well, good morning. We've been talking about the potential for a government shutdown for a while now, but this is something different. This memo obtained by NBC News, it directs federal agencies to prepare for firings, mass firings, in addition to layoffs if there is a government shutdown next week. Now, typically in a government shutdown situation, federal workers stay at home for the duration, and when Congress passes a spending measure, they come back to work. But this memo from the Office of Management and Budget directs agencies to consider RIFs, consider firings for programs and projects that run out of funding on October 1st, don't have alternative funding sources, and are, quote, not consistent with the president's priorities. Unlike a furlough, which is temporary, lasting only through the length of the shutdown, these job losses, they would be permanent. Now, the threat of firings, in addition to furloughs, puts major pressure on Democrats to back a Republican-backed spending bill here on Capitol Hill, something that they do not want to do. But, of course, this is a big issue for people in our area. A lot of federal workers here, anytime jobs, whether it's firings or furloughs, are threatened, it affects a lot of people in our area. And, of course, the deadline is looming here. The clock is ticking. Back to you.
Megan, has there been any real reaction from Democratic lawmakers about the memo?
Yeah, needless to say, Democrats are not happy with any of this. They believe it's a stunt. A couple of quotes that I can share with you here. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer released a statement saying, "This is an attempt at intimidation. Donald Trump has been firing federal workers since day one, not to govern, but to scare." House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries wrote on X to the director of OMB saying, "We will not be intimidated by your threat to engage in mass firings. Get lost." So a lot of strong words and, a very volatile situation here. We're going to just have to wait and see what happens over the next couple of days here, that deadline next week.
There are just 3 days left to get anything done as the country barrels toward a government shutdown. The White House is threatening mass layoffs of federal workers if Democrats don't pass a Republican-supported continuing resolution to fund the government into November. Republicans and President Trump are trying to blame Democrats, despite controlling both houses of Congress and the White House, and canceling meetings this week because the president abruptly canceled one with Democratic leaders to work on a deal to avert a shutdown. But many in the Democratic base are urging the party's leadership to fight back in a shutdown battle and show more pushback to President Trump's increasingly authoritarian agenda. Joining us now is Representative Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania. She is a member of the House Appropriations Committee, so cares deeply about the government being funded. Thank you, Congresswoman, for coming on. I want to start with the threat from the White House and the administration thus far saying we are going to fire people if you shut down the government and we're going to blame it on Democrats. Congresswoman, maybe I'm crazy, but I feel like they have already been firing people willy-nilly in the government for months. So is this a real threat? Are Democrats concerned about that? Are they concerned about getting blamed for it? Or is this just a tactic from the White House?
Well, it's so revealing of their motive. After all, when vote says instead of furlough, we're all talking about if this goes into a shutdown, what do we do with my coworkers? Are they furloughed? Can they come in? Will they be paid? Those kinds of things. This administration cares nothing about a government shutdown, and through that statement reveals the ambition to shut it down. They want to fire more people. This is just going to be another round of Doge 2.0. They love that they have canned more than 200,000 federal employees. These are not political people. These are people who were doing their work, who many of them spent decades in whatever agency they were in, and were such a part of the backbone of American strength and security. In the meantime, as you point out, the president canceled his meeting with Democratic leaders, is out golfing, and the Republicans in the House, under the leadership of Mr. Johnson, Speaker Johnson, are nowhere to be seen. Democrats will be in Washington on Monday.
Yeah. So I want you guys to understand where we're at right now, okay? Before we get into this ridiculous interview on CNN between Discount Obama and Dylan Mulvaney on CNN, right? Where we stand is that Republicans have a continuing resolution on the table where they say, hey, you know what? We can keep the government open for a few more weeks to negotiate on things that actually are negotiable points, right? For example, when it comes to the extension of the Obamacare subsidies, which in my opinion, I don't think that Republicans should negotiate on that at all. I think that they should be allowed to expire. Again, we don't need it, right? It happened during the pandemic. We don't need it. But anyways, we'll negotiate on stuff like that, but let's keep the government open for a little bit longer in order to do so. So Republicans not only want to keep the government open, right, but they also have a continuing resolution, like a clean continuing resolution, right, that changes nothing to keep the government open in order to negotiate on certain items. Democrats are saying no, right? We want everything that we're demanding, or else we're going to point the finger at you and blame you for shutting down the government. And Republicans have said, okay, well, if that's the case, that's fine, right? We're going to tell you to kick rocks, right? We're going to cancel talks. We're going to go on about our business. And on top of that, if you decide to let the government shut down, we'll just use it in order to fire more people, right? To get rid of more workers that don't align with the agenda of the Trump administration. So I just want everybody to understand where we're at, okay? So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
My congressional source tonight is the leader of Democrats in the House, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and it's great to have you here, sir. Obviously, today's Friday, government funding runs out midnight Tuesday. I don't have to tell you that. Is it fair to say that a government shutdown is inevitable at this point?
Well, I'm here in Washington right now, and Democrats are ready, willing, and able to sit down with anyone at any time, at any place here in Washington, D.C., in order to try to find a bipartisan agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people in terms of their health, their safety, and their economic well-being. And our position has been clear. We will not support this partisan Republican spending bill because it continues to gut the health care of the American people. We will support an agreement.
He means illegal immigrants. That's what he actually means, okay? That's what he means.
That actually provides funding to keep the government open that is negotiated in a bipartisan way. The president agreed to a meeting, and then he pulled the meeting. Now he's fled town and is on the golf course at the Ryder Cup in New York. It makes no sense. They're trying to shut the government down, and Republicans, of course, control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, which is why they will clearly be blamed.
You know what's so hilarious about this? Is that the Democrats and the mainstream media, they're trying to push this propaganda, right? They're trying to push out this message that, well, Republicans are to blame. Now, keep in mind, it doesn't matter if Republicans are in charge of the government or Democrats are in charge of the government. Every single time they're going to blame Republicans, right? If the government shuts down. But in this specific situation, the accusation that it is going to be the fault of Republicans if the government shuts down is just so ridiculous. If you know even the basic facts about what's actually happening here. Republicans want to keep the government open, right? Republicans have all the votes needed. The House already passed a resolution to keep the government open, right? So this is not Republican infighting, right? No, that's not what's going on here. Republicans are unified in what they want to do in order to keep the government open. It is Democrats that are holding it up in the Senate because we need Democrat votes in order to keep the government open. But the House, which is controlled by Republicans, has already done what they needed to do in order to keep the government open. We just need Senate Democrats to get on board with keeping the government open, because all of the Republican senators are also on board with keeping the government open as well too. Okay, that's where we're at. And again, when you look at the demands from Democrats, again, it's just ridiculous. Like, it's just non-starters. Like, why do we need more Obamacare subsidies that were enacted during the pandemic when, again, we're not in the pandemic anymore? Why do we need that? Why do we need that? Also, on top of that, when you look at the Medicaid reform, okay, and the cuts to liberal media propaganda networks, those are passed in Congress, right? Those were passed in Congress, okay? So why is it that you're demanding that Republicans repeal something that they passed fair and square in Congress? Like, that's just a ridiculous demand. That's a ridiculous demand in order to keep the government open. They passed what the American people voted for. So I'm trying to figure out, why is it that Democrats think that Republicans are to blame when Republicans are all on board with keeping the government open? It is Democrats that are holding it up, right? That's the funny part about it. It's one thing if we needed Republican votes in order to keep the government open, but that's not the case. We need Democrat votes. It is Democrats that are holding out saying, hey, we're going to let the government shut down. Even though we have a continuing resolution ready and available for Democrats to agree to in order to keep the government open, we don't need Republican votes to keep the government open, right? We need Democrat votes to keep the government open, and we don't need all Democrat votes, right? We don't need all the Democrats to agree, okay? We just need a few, like a handful of Democrats to agree, and the government stays open. So again, Democrats don't have any room for making these crazy demands, right? You don't have any room, okay? You can't make these type of crazy demands, but that's what they're doing, okay? And they're doing it because they are feeling pressure from their far left base of Trump deranged radical lunatics to stand up to Trump, right? So, yeah, that's what's happening here.
Yeah, and the president returned to Washington earlier, but he canceled his meeting that was planned with you and Chuck Schumer. House Republicans are not in Washington. I think given that if there is no one to negotiate with, what power do Democrats have to stop a shutdown from happening?
Well, that's exactly the point, that Republicans are in the majority in the House and in the Senate, and Donald Trump is the president. If they decide to shut the government down, then the government is going to shut down. We believe we have a sense of responsibility in terms of trying to find a bipartisan path forward, which we've made clear to the White House and to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the House and in the Senate, but they've refused to have a conversation, and they've canceled votes on the eve of the government shutting down next Wednesday. We were scheduled to be in session on Monday and Tuesday. By the way, Democrats will be here in Washington, D.C. on Monday, ready to do our job. Unfortunately, House Republicans will be on vacation, scattered across the country and the world.
Just something you said to Punch Bowl News stuck out to me earlier. Is it true that you have never actually met the president?
No, well, we haven't had a formal meeting during his time in office. We did spend some time together along with the other legislative leaders on Inauguration Day, both at the White House when he was greeted formally by former President Joe Biden, and then, of course, at the Capitol during the inauguration, which, by the way, was like a supervillain convention that the American people had to witness, and it's been a national nightmare ever since.
Yeah, so you're seeing that, you heard that, okay? Discount Obama here is desperate, right? Inside, he's panicking because he knows that he can't really win this, right? Politically speaking, everybody knows that this is going to be the fault of Democrats because of very basic reasons, okay? Common sense. Democrats are holding out votes for demands over things that really don't have anything to do with keeping the government open, right? These are just demands that Democrats are making in order to look tough to their base of radical lunatics. The problem is that if Democrats allow a shutdown, the blowback is going to be against them. Why do I say that? Well, the reason why I say that is because Republican voters, conservative voters, actually don't care that much about the government shutting down, right? Let's be real, okay? And the radical lunatics might not care that much about the government being shut down, but they will care about what happens as a result, okay, which is mass layoffs. Also on top of that, I think that the Democrat base outside of radical lunatics do care about the government shutting down. They're not going to want the government shut down. And I think Democrats are ultimately going to take the blame because they're going to be under pressure in order to agree with the Republicans to at the very least keep the government open in order to continue negotiations. And that is the current position of the Republicans. Hey, let's keep the government open and continue negotiations. Democrats are basically saying, no, we don't want to continue negotiations. You have to capitulate to all of our ridiculous demands, even though we're in the minority, right? We don't have the leverage, but you have to capitulate to our demands or else the government shuts down. Yeah, I don't think that's going to fly. I don't think that this strategy is going to fly. And this is why they're going to fold. 100% they're going to fold. Okay, I'm not saying that the government won't shut down, but if it does shut down, it's not going to be for a long time, right? Democrats do not have the cojones to stomach a government shutdown, not the way that Republicans do, right? Again, the conservative and Republican base, a lot of conservatives actually want the government to shut down, right? They're like, oh, okay, yeah, the government shuts down. That's a great thing, right? But yeah, when it comes to Democrats, I don't think they have that type of leverage. They're in over their skis. And we're going to see soon because, again, my prediction is that once again, just like last time, they're going to fold. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.